everyone. Thank you for joining us. We've got one person in person. I'm sure we have a lot of friends on Zoom. I would like to call this special meeting of the Board of Education to order. There will be another special Board of Education meeting on Monday, January 24th at 7 p.m. in the board meeting room. The next regular Board of Education meeting will be held on Tuesday, January 25th at 7:30 p.m. in the board meeting room. Thank you. So thank you, everyone. I'll be brief with a chairperson's report as we continue through the budget process and going through questions from the board, from our RTM committees, Board of Finance, and our other partners at CPAC and CDSP. Just a thank you to all those folks that are participating in this process. I think it's an open, transparent process where we literally go line by line and talk about almost everything in the budget. So all questions and comments and thoughts are appreciated. And I think we've got a good process to continue to get all those questions answered. As all of you have been participating in this process, you know there are a lot of questions around a program that's been put forth, Open Choice, and also a lot of discussion around the one-to-one initiative and the direction that's going in up at the high school. So the meeting on the 24th will be around those specific topics with also some guest speakers from CES around Open Choice. So we look forward to continuing to get more information and answer questions about those programs. I would ask that you continue to participate, come to board meetings, email board members, email your PTO reps, your friends at RTM, F&B, and Education to get your questions in and get your questions answered. I suggest you stay away from social media. Social media has a lot of misinformation out there and wrong information out there, and it just adds to the confusion. We understand there are a lot of questions and a lot of information that's needed, and we're ready, willing, and able to answer those questions and provide that information. But the proper way to do that is through the specific RTM organizations, the board members, and that way we get the right information out to everyone. So thank you for that. With that, Michelle, I will turn it over to public comment.
Okay, good evening. Would the person in person have public comment? Sorry.
Who is that? Oh, that's Beth. Okay.
If you would like to speak during public comment, please click the participants icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Next, click the raised hand option. You will notice a blue hand icon appear in the upper corner of your screen where your face and or number or name appears. When it is your turn to speak, the facilitator will identify you and announce that you're unmuted for public comment. Once recognized and unmuted, please state your name and address. You will have up to 3 minutes to comment. Ms. Teresa Vogt, you are recognized and unmuted.
Great, thank you. Actually, this is David Vogt, 22 Circle Road. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight in favor of the Open Choice program. I have listened and read the information provided by opponents of the Open Choice program, and I want to state for the record that the opponents of Open Choice are using erroneous facts and figures as a scare tactic, not grounded in facts or truth. Letters are circulating that falsely claim and imply that Darien taxpayers spend $23,000 per student annually, and while the state funds only $3,000 per student, the Darien taxpayers are effectively left holding the bag and have to fund the $20,000 balance. Excuse me. Nothing can be further from the truth. Clearly, the supporters of this particular argument lack a basic understanding of financial forecasting, fixed cost absorption, and operating leverage. By adding 4 students each to Henley, Holmes, Oxbridge, and Tokenique, the incremental cost to educate these students will be minimal. The Open Choice students do not require another teacher. They do not miraculously change the benefit assumptions for district personnel. They do not change the utility consumption assumptions. They do not change the cost to develop curriculum, and they do not change the athletic budget. While I'm hopeful this fundamental economic mistake is an honest misunderstanding and will be ignored by the administration and the board, I'm concerned that opponents of Open Choice are using this intentional falsehood to obscure the underlying reason they oppose the program and increase in the diversity of the Darien student population. So in conclusion, I fully support the administration and the Board of Ed in funding the Open Choice program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for speaking.
Gregory Grambling, you are unmuted and recognized.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the continued efforts, in particular to the Board of Ed members. I'd like to reiterate my opposition to Hartford's open choice program and to any further involvement of California consultant Ken Shelton in the Darien Public Schools. This past week, I attended the CDSP PTO meeting via Zoom. I was surprised to be the only male participant via Zoom or in person, given that the CDSP and PTOs seem to be strong advocates for diversity. I was even more surprised to see Dr. Adley show up in person and openly push the attendees to support Ken Shelton in open choice. Given this was my first CDSP PTO meeting, which Zoom participants weren't able to make comments on or provide feedback, it made me wonder if the CDSP and PTOs are representing Darien parents, as they publicly state, or the administration. Finally, last week, a number of good questions were raised by the Board of Ed members, including when do we get back to normal at school, which Dr. Adley refused to answer. I inquired with Darien's health director, David Knopf, regarding hospitalizations in Darien, in which he indicated, and I quote, "The good news is we have no reports of hospitalizations of any residents, vaccinated or not," end quote. Not a single hospitalization. Given how critical parents have made issues of masks, et cetera, I would have hoped Dr. Adley, or at least Ms. Kasuchi, would be on top of this important information rather than seeming like deer in headlights. In the fall, the Board of Ed and administration decided to implement a self-governing policy to wear masks at these meetings as a sign of solidarity with kids in our schools. If you really want to align with students, I would propose that the Board of Ed members and administration begin wearing masks anytime they are forcing our defenseless kids to wear masks. Therefore, 5 days per week, 9 hours per day, no breaks except for 30 minutes for lunch and 10 minutes for snack taken outside, even if it's below freezing like it was today. If you cough or sneeze, keep the mask on and keep wearing that solid mask for the rest of the day. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gramling.
Mr. Gremlin, could we have your address, please?
It's Blueberry Lane.
Thank you.
Jackie Miller, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi, my name is Jackie Miller and I live at 84 Fitch Avenue. In the materials for tonight's meeting, I was surprised to see that the response to the CDSP's question about whether the board planned further discussion about the bus walking radius policy was the note that, quote, "The BOE considered this policy last year and did not recommend any changes," end quote. This seems to me an incomplete summary of the way we left the discussion last year. At the BOE meetings on January 12th and January 26th, and the policy committee meeting on January 19th, 2021, the challenges of COVID and the inability to get an accurate sense of bus ridership were explicitly named as reasons not to amend the bus policy. Mr. Deneen recommended that the transportation remain on the agenda for further study and ongoing conversation when we return to normal times. A year later, I'm not sure what normal times are anymore. And while I love having the opportunity to come to talk to you every year, this is a conversation that I started when my son was a freshman. Next year, he'll be a high school senior, and there's still no permanent solution for him. This isn't just an issue for high school students who need the buses to get to and from school. This is a problem for every car that sits in traffic on Middlesex. This is a problem for every student who's late to first period because they're sitting in traffic on Norotan. This is a problem for the parents who can't make the turn into the parking lot at MMS because the line of cars waiting at the four-way stop sign on Hollow Tree Ridge just won't budge. More buses are a win for everyone. I hope this is the year we really get to talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller. Who do we have next, Michelle?
Username MZ Zablocki. You are recognized and unmuted. You are still muted, Ms. Zablocki.
It looks like you're still muted. There you go. Can you hear us? We cannot hear
Can you
you.
hear me now? Sorry.
Yes,
can
you might
hear me
have to, you might have to put it up a little bit, your sound.
now? Okay. Is this
There you
better?
go. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening. Melissa Zablocki, Relihan Road. And I'll be quick. First, I do just want to say thank you to the administration and the district for the increased transparency that's come through over the past recent months. We do appreciate it as parents, and it's been great to see. I just would have a few comments tonight, informally, just about CDSP in general. There's a lot of mystery still around this group. I know they've been on the scene for some time, but not a lot of parents are familiar with them, who they are, you know, how they're selected, the process for selection, and just some things I think maybe the public should be aware of, as they are ultimately an umbrella group that represents the parents as a whole, collective body of parents of Darien. So some more transparency around CDSP, I think, is needed. What is their role within the school and the community exactly? And personally, I'm interested in to see maybe even a hierarchy of how they communicate with parents in the community. I personally have reached out and have not had a response, and it's just been to a generic CDSP email website or email address. So I don't know, who exactly my representatives are, or how to get in touch with them, or even how to get involved. So just a lot of mystery around CDSP still, and I understand they were gathering comments for budget to bring to the board. But again, as representing a collective group of parents, just a lot of unknowns around that group. So I just wanted to communicate that because it's coming to me from other parents as well. So thank you again, and thank you for your time tonight. Be well.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Susie Flaherty, you are unmuted and recognized.
Did you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for having me. Mr. Deneen, I'm so sorry. I really respect your comments about not continually repeating things over and over again. And I wish we didn't have to do that, but unfortunately, the same misconceptions keep getting put forward. And I just wanted to say, Open Choice is Connecticut's program. It is one that has been working for Connecticut school children for 25 years through the terms of 4 governors, 2 Republican and 2 Democrat. I encourage you not to be concerned about which students might be selected through the Open Choice lottery. Fear about whom we might end up with from outside our community, whomever they may be, is what got us here in the first place. There is absolutely no point in speculation about the children who will apply for the lottery and who will come to us. It's a lottery. Open Choice is not the first step to regionalization. This misconception was cleared up at our last meeting. None of the 47 school districts in Connecticut that participate in Open Choice have been forced to regionalize. Mr. Ken Shelton has a non-traditional position on grading, homework, and curriculum. Mr. Shelton is not being hired as a consultant for grading, homework, and curriculum. He will have 0 input on these things. This was also cleared up at the last meeting. Calling Mr. Shelton a California consultant is an attempt to cast doubt on someone who is not from around here and is not like us. Creating a label for a person that defines him only by where he comes from is exactly the kind of prejudice we are hoping to begin to correct in our community. I would argue that anyone who makes these assertions about Mr. Shelton and Open Choice is the exact reason why we need it, and we need it now. My eldest graduates from DHS in 95 days. Also graduating in 95 days are the students who came to us 98 days ago to tearfully, nervously, angrily describe their experience with hate and ignorance in school and ask you for your intervention. Also graduating, the seniors who say, nothing is going to change. So what's the point? These kids have 95 days left with us. The kids who write and use hate speech in school also have 95 days left this year. The same is true for the many victims of that ignorance and hate. I urge you to act now on Ken Shelton and DEI so we can send the class of 2022 off into the world knowing that change is possible, and so that the underclassmen can return next year to a school where they are seen and heard in both word and deed. We have the right person. We only have 95 more days. The time is now. Thank you. Oh, Six Lake Drive.
Thank you.
Ms. Teresa Vogt, you are unmuted and recognized.
Thank you, Teresa Vogt, 22 Circle Road. I don't think this is a place for me to have to make this comment, but given that 2 public commenters have decided to, for lack of a better term, attack the CDSP organization, as a former PTO chair and a former CDSP rep for the middle school, I don't understand the attacks. I don't understand people thinking it's some hidden organization, some secret organization. It is simply the umbrella organization of the 7 PTOs. That is it. Anything you need to know going on at CDSP, contact your building PTO chair, because that's what's going on at CDSP. There aren't some secret meetings, and the attacks on the volunteers who put countless hours in, probably more than any other board member in this town, regardless of the board, to attack them is really unfair. If you want to know what's going on at CDSP meeting, their meetings are public. Go. Easy to go. So if the attacks on CDSP could come to an end, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.
Abigail Hornstein, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Go ahead, Abigail.
Fantastic. 17 Edmund Street. So I wanted to talk about 2 points. First, at the last board meeting, I heard a lot of criticism of people for having the maturity and intellectual creativity to change their opinion over the years. I actually find that very fascinating. There's one research paper that I reference in nearly every college class I teach called Ownership Structure in Corporate Performance. It was published in 2001 in Journal of Financial Economics, which is considered to be an A++ journal, like literally the top journal. 3 publications in there will get you tenure at a place like UConn. So it's a pretty damn good place. And has now been cited by about 4,000 people. And again, the mean and median citations for an economics paper are 0. They have a graph that shows how this relationship between structure and performance has changed over the years. And what's fascinating about it is you can see many papers, even papers written by Nobel Prize winners, have been overturned over the years, and consensus changes as we get more information. So I urge everyone to have respect for the fact that Dr. Adley's opinions have changed. We give the Nobel Prize at times to people for changing their opinions. So I hope we would have the same respect for a superintendent. Secondly, with regard to Ken Shelton and the diversity initiative, I was trying to figure out if his background's representative. I think it is. In fact, I looked at the undergraduate college of every member of the Board of Education and looked at their diversity, equity, and inclusion leaders to see what their backgrounds are. Each of your undergraduate institutions has personnel with backgrounds similar to Ken Shelton's in charge of initiatives at your schools. I think that is quite telling to see that places that you are presumably proud of have hired similar people and put them in the same position of responsibility. Similarly, I have written nearly 200 letters for graduate school admissions in the last 5 years. Every single one of them has asked me if the student or applicant is comfortable working in a diverse environment and to comment on their background. When I am approached by a student from a background such as Darien, I often decline to write a letter for them because I cannot write a letter unless I will endorse the person. And when they come from a background devoid of diversity, they rarely demonstrate skills or a comfort level in my classroom that makes me feel like I can write an honest letter supporting them. Similarly, every job applicant at a college is expected to write a diversity statement.
Abigail, you're almost at time.
I know. And finally, colleges, when proposing new majors and programs, have the same expectation. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Abigail.
Amy Zerby, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi, Amy Zerby, 9 Morehouse Drive. You know, I actually wasn't going to speak tonight, but given the attacks on CDSP, I felt the need to. I've been watching Board of Ed meetings for 7 years, and I have never seen parents attack CDSP at these board meetings until this year. It seems unwarranted. And I just wanted to clarify a few things. I am no longer on CDSP, but I was for 5 years. I was at the CDSP meeting last week that someone mentioned, and Dr. Adley was not pushing parents to accept Ken Shelton. And like someone said before, there's a lot of information on CDSP out there. There is a website, cdspdarien.org. If you aren't subscribed to the school wires, do that because there's information there as well. And talk to your PTO chairs. There's nothing, under cloak and dagger going on with CDSP. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Dan Guller, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi, I'm Dan Guller, 10 Walmsley Road. Longtime listener, first-time caller. It seems to me, and I hear it again tonight, I've sat in on several of these meetings, and it seems like Darien does have a problem, and it's not anti-Semitism, it's not racism, it's not classism that I'm talking about, it's inhospitality, which is a major problem. Our town has a reputation of being unfriendly to outsiders, and I hear it in criticism of Ken Shelton, called California's Ken Shelton earlier this evening. I hear it in criticism of open choice, which once again we heard this evening, Hartford's open choice. I heard it in this last election cycle with politicians calling for, quote, local control. The common thread in all of this is fear of outsiders. And this is an attitude more aligned with the Darien of the 1950s. And this is why Darien is the butt of a joke in Auntie Maine, or a cautionary tale from Gentleman's Agreement. But this isn't the Darien that I found when my husband and I moved here 12 years ago. That's not the Darien we're raising our son in. That's not the Darien that showed up by the hundreds for the town's first menorah lighting this past year. Open choice is a way we can help our children, who can help children who are not as fortunate as our children are, because our children live here and some aren't as lucky. So we can give children that opportunity. Yesterday was MLK Day, and there's a quote that I saw posted yesterday. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? So that's my question to this town. What are you doing for others? Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Carolina Magui, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi, everybody. 28 Kensett, Carolina Magawi. I'll take 20 seconds of your time. In regards to the participation of people in CDSP and volunteering, I've been volunteering for the schools since we moved back here to the US in 2014. And I'm sure all the PTOs and the CDSP would love to see male parents arrive and volunteer to all the positions that we have for volunteering in the school. So please, Mr. Grambling and everybody else out there, come and join us. We're a great group of people working very hard for our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina.
Peter Orfanos, you are unmuted and recognized.
Peter, can you hear us?
Yep. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. First of all, I'm speaking in my personal capacity at this moment, not in other capacity, which we'll hearing from some of us later tonight. And I say this is a former CDSP member. CDSP is essentially a group of parents who give a darn about the public schools and want to make the public schools the best possible experience they can for the residents of this town and their children. And they put in countless selfless hours and towards that goal. Anyone who is ascribing other motives simply ground that type of point of view is simply groundless. And again, all meetings are public, they're open. Go to the meetings. If you want to know what CDSP is all about, go read the website. And if you don't know what CDSP is about, then you're not working hard enough to find out. Thank you.
Peter, can you let us know your address, please?
Oh, pardon me, 67 Raymond Street.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
There are no more raised hands at this time.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Janine, can I have a point of order? I wanted to let everyone speak, but we received in our meeting now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
11.
6 comments on CDSP. The Board of Education is not in control of CDSP. We don't tell it how to work, how it not to work. So we need to understand this is a Board of Education meeting. And so CDSP comments should be directed to CDSP because we're trying to run a meeting here.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. All right, are we good, Michelle?
Seems so.
All right. So we will move on to comments from Board of Finance, RTM Education, RTM F and B on fiscal 23
Jeff.
proposed budget. Board of Finance, had a
Oh, he's there. Never mind.
yeah. They are forwarding questions to us. There's actually a conflict where they have a meeting this evening. So I see Beth in the audience from RTM F and B. So I'm not sure, Beth or Jack, how you want to start out.
I'm going to start out, this is Jack Davis, 197 Hoyt Street. We're going to do a 3-person tag team today. I'm going to start, we're going to hand it off to Beth, who's there, and then Peter Orfanos will wrap it up. First, we'd like to thank the Board of Ed for the opportunity to present the RTM Finance and Budget Committee's preliminary comments on the superintendent's proposed fiscal year 23 Board of Education budget. We'd also like to thank the administration for their quick response to questions from Super Saturday, as well as the follow-up to the Board of Ed meeting. It provided a great deal of additional information on the proposed budget, and as I mentioned earlier today, probably one of the best responses that I've seen. I've just been asked to show my face. That should be frightening for everyone. At the state of the town, the Board of Finance Chair presented to the RTM and the whole town guidance for the fiscal year 23 budgets. Core growth guidance was 2.5%. New growth, including additional headcount, added capital investments and benefit changes, yielded an overall target growth of 3% for the town. New growth required clear and compelling case. And let me repeat that last part. A clear and compelling case, which means demonstrated need supported by historical metrics and financial analysis addressing both the short-term and long-term costs. And that's our starting point. One of the things that we're asking is, can the administration assist our committee in reconciling core growth versus new growth as presented in the Thursday, January 6th superintendent's proposed fiscal year 23 presentation? We believe some, if not most of the component parts were presented, but it's probably a lot safer to assist the committee versus leaving us to our own devices. We're requesting that new growth be further divided into educational, non-educational growth. For example, 2-point FTEs attributable to enrollment, Mandarin, the LPN and special ed teacher are education. The others appear to be non-education. This reconciliation should include footnotes for future years. In a response to years, the fully loaded costs for certain proposed non-professional FTEs did not include pension costs, which are not included in the proposed budget because they're not here, but for future years. And we have to figure out how to calculate that out since it's not done on an individual basis. Part of our question is the core growth due to healthcare, utilities, and other increases resulting in a 2.75 or a 3% core growth? That's important to know when we're evaluating this budget. This brings us to the next level. The Board of Ed represents the largest single component of the overall town's budget and thus has the greatest impact in determining the town's mill rate. The current year's adopted budget had a 4.03 increase. The fiscal year 23 proposal is 3.97, under 4%, primarily due to the adoption of bring your own devices. Overall, 4% budgets are not sustainable for long term. Yes, the Board of Finance does have budget tools in its arsenal to bring the overall budget within a 3% guidance target. But last year's approved budget included all town capital being bonded or paid by the general fund, primarily through transfers from the Reserve Fund for Capital Non-Recurring Expenses Cleanup, which had long been a F&B request. The grand list increases, if it does 1% a year, yields another $1.5 million. And debt service has significant paydowns, and new debt pushes out repayments of principal. That being said, continued going to the well on the grand list to cover our capital expenses is not a long-term viable option. And with new major projects from the Board of Ed and other infrastructure projects from the town, the main focus needs to be on operating budgets and their increases. This is the main driver of the mill rate. I mention this because as we go through budgets, this is and has always been the starting point for how the RTM Finance and Budget Committee reviews the overall budget, looking at operating and capital budgets. Again, I want to stress that that will be our focus on the budget. And I now hand off to Beth, who's there with you.
Thank you, Jack.
Well, I've never done this with a mask before, so if it's impossible to understand, let me know and I will remove
I
it.
think we can hear you pretty clearly, so thank you.
Okay. Significant attention in this year's budget has been focused on two areas: open choice and the bring your own devices at the high school. There's been a lot more discussion on those two issues than on the addition of 10.7 FTEs, despite the fact that the latter has a greater financial impact on the overall Board of Ed budget, both in the near term and far into the future. The committee concurs with the Board of Ed that having a special meeting regarding the financial projections and all of the details of the program makes sense. That being said, the actual cost appears to be a simple cost accounting exercise. To account for open choice is a basic cost accounting principle. The variable cost to support any student at a grade level, as the cost of teacher, desks, utilities, and other related sunk costs are fixed and wouldn't change unless an additional section is created in the elementary schools. In middle and high schools, as long as the total students joining a district doesn't exceed the maximum capacity of the school, again, variable cost to support the student is the total cost. This is the safety net caveat that special education costs can be provided by the sending district or charged back thereto. And transportation costs are absorbed by the sending district. The committee is generally in favor of the initiative. There are more mixed feelings on the bring your own devices within the committee. The final decision whether to implement or provide a hybrid model will have an impact on the proposed budget, not only in equipment, but also on the new FTEs requested. The committee feels that the administration has established a compelling case for the following new growth FTEs: the LPN who's tied to an IEP, the new special education driver, as the driver shortage is well documented, new teachers for Mandarin at Middlesex and for Hindley second grade. We would like more color and a little more information on the following new FTEs. The 0.5 paraprofessionals at both Oxbridge and Holmes, we would just like to confirm that these are based on enrollment ratios and thus that's part of the normal growth of the school. The high school physical and health education drivers, what is causing the increase in those, and the Hindley PE teacher, which is 0.2 FTE. Then the committee has questions on the following additions. For the campus monitor, this position is part of the American Rescue Plan in the current budget. We acknowledge the better student to the combined monitor SRO ratio with this addition. The committee further understands the financial and reporting relationship differences, as well as the rationale for those differences. But we'd like to be provided with specific metrics used to determine improved building security. What are the measurable goals to be accomplished by the campus monitor addition? And could you please provide a description of how the SROs and campus monitors overlap and work together? What are the specific differences in their goals? For the Bursar administrative assistant, In reviewing the additional write-up, it appears that this position has been working an additional 160 hours. Although GASB 84 will increase the number of transactions to be transferred from one system to the other, we are not sure the incremental hours over the 160 hours already being recorded have been demonstrated. Here are some additional questions. 25% of the bursar's role is managing all ordering for DHS, processing requisitions, placing orders for teachers and administrators, working with departments to ensure goods are received, fielding phone calls, and working with accounts payable to provide invoices to close out purchase orders are responsibilities that must have been done prior to the addition of the bursar. Who did the bursar replace for these responsibilities? Also, Darien is not alone in dealing with GASB 84 and School Cash Online. Has an automated feed from School Cash Online to Munis been investigated or discussed? Have the outside auditors determined which components currently in the student activity accounts need to be recorded as government funds or special revenues? And with the two new fund categories, will two new town funds be established to comply with GASB 84? If so, when? And finally, has the administration investigated using School Cash Online as the subsidiary of books complying with GASB 84, thereby reducing the number of entries needed to be entered into Munis? The next FTE on which we have questions is the groundskeeper. The committee does not believe a compelling case has been made to substantiate this position. The full cost for the groundskeeper presented is $108,096. However, that cost did not include future pension costs. The actual cost is even higher. Would it be possible for existing staff to work overtime, or can town staff perform some of these duties, either as straight time or overtime, and charge the district? What is the cost to contract these services to an outside vendor? And finally, the care of grounds historic costs have been stable. Even a 5% increase represents only $15,000. So it's well below the proposed $108,000 cost for this added FTE. This position costs, fully loaded cost, even without future pension, represents 50% of the total outside contracted groundskeeping budgeted expense. For the Oxbridge custodian, we'd just like to confirm that the square footage is increasing from the current school being 50,000 square feet to 74,000 for the new part of Oxbridge that will be open next year, which will necessitate the increase. And finally, for my part, the technician for all technology repairs. The committee does not believe a compelling case has been made to substantiate this position in the proposed budget and should be deferred until the implementation of Bring Your Own and evaluation of tickets with the additional new equipment in the next budget is in place. So we could reevaluate this position for the 2024 budget. Fully loaded cost for this position is $104,670. However, this cost also does not include future pension costs and thus will be higher in future budget years. Can the administration provide a 3-year experience of repairs and tickets broken down by elementary schools, middle school, and high school by the device and level of service required? And with the purchase of new desktops at Middlesex, devices for DHS teachers, and the Bring Your Own devices and the other proposed technology purchases in the budget, one would assume that hopefully repairs with all this new technology should decrease. And so perhaps this is not the year to introduce this. What budget line item shows the reduction of repairs suggested in the original presentation as an offset to current outside repairs? And is it realistic to assume that any but the easiest repairs will be performed on DHS Bring Your Own devices? Why wouldn't the existing DHS technical staff perform these repairs as they currently do? We do not believe the ratios presented without full understanding of the underlying uses and applications within each other school district in the DIRG is a sufficient compelling case to add this FTE. And with that, I'm going to turn the rest over to Peter Orfanos, back online.
Thank you, Beth. Peter, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, Peter. Go ahead.
Okay. One moment. Thank you. There are a few areas where our committee would like additional clarification. First has to do with technology. There's a significant amount of technology proposed to be purchased in the midst of a documented chip shortage, which is not anticipated to be resolved until the latter part of 2023, as well as significant distribution costs added to consumer discretionary purchases. How do the proposed costs relate to the same purchase costs from the prior year? What are the increases, if any? Concerning the middle school desktops, the uniformity proposed in devices sounds good, but there is a cost for uniformity. What are the needs for each component of the component groups requiring desktops to be replaced? Their uses, processing speed requirements and storage requirements. The latter two, processing speed and RAM, drive the cost of the device. It does not make sense that the nurses in library and art classes or administration all need the same processing speeds or storage requirements. Why are the suggested unit costs of the desktops appear to be so high? Are there other added software costs to the purchase? If so, what are these costs? As concerns iPads and MacBook Airs, the committee is still not satisfied that both devices are required based upon the web-based instructional capabilities and the compatibility of both with the technology in the classrooms. Can the teachers' MacBook Airs be deferred until fiscal 24, as the use of pens, etc., for instructional purposes appears to be of greater benefit to the educational experience in the classrooms? With respect to the MacBook Airs, the teacher MacBook Airs have 13-inch screens, while the student MacBook Airs have 12-inch screens. Why do teachers require the larger screen? And the reason why we're bringing this up is that the potential savings of making the teacher's machines the 12-inch screen is at $200 per device, or over combined to a cost of $20,000. We'd just like to clarify this request a bit more. High school student desktops. Again, can the administration provide the uses of the 150 student desktops? What storage and processing speeds are required for each use? Does each use require the same capabilities? And the same question applies to Middlesex Middle School in relationship the cost for desktops, which appear to be high. District servers. Do all the servers in our district need to be replaced at the same time? Can these be implemented over a 2 to 3 year period? Can the administration provide a list of all of these devices? Where are they located? What exactly are their uses? What is their anticipated replacement cycle? Turning to the Fitch Academy, we'd like to thank the Nielsen family for their working relationship with the Board of Education to house the Fitch Academy. We would like some further clarity on the annual escalation clause regarding the leased property. There does not seem to be a consistent increase in rent over the last few years. The percentage increase in the lease has varied significantly from year to year. For example, from 1819 to 1920, the cost went up 5.67%. The following year, fiscal 19 to 20 to 2021, it rose 12.7%. In the last fiscal year, 2021 to 21-22, the cost rose 4.7%. And the projected increase for this year's budget, I believe, is 10.4%. The new AP Spanish edition, although there is a more significant number of students who potentially might enroll in AP Spanish, which we think is great. What is the historical percentage of students taking this course? Are the materials budgeted for anticipating 100% enrollment? And if so, is that a reasonable way to anticipate that cost? Utilities escalation. Both oil and natural gas are escalating. The town paid extra to have dual fuel capabilities installed at the schools. Has an analysis been conducted to determine if on a BTU basis, it makes sense to switch to a different fuel at individual schools? And finally, capital items. The oil replacement tank. The committee would request additional detail on the oil tank at Darien High School. If this was a problem from the beginning, why did we accept it? The next item has to do with replacement of elevators at the 3 elementary schools that are being refurbished. Are these elevators all the same age and in identical repair state? The committee is also wondering why these costs are not part of the refurbishment of the schools instead of a standalone capital item, even if the state will not reimburse the town for this initiative. If they cannot be added above, can the administration request funds to provide a strong detailed estimate of the anticipated costs? Thank you for your time, allowing us to request additional information on this budget.
Thank you,
Turn it
Peter.
back to Jack.
All right, thank you, RTM F&B. Appreciate that. We will move on to RTM Education. I am looking for Ed to see if he's in our Zoom land.
Hi.
Hey, Ed, how are you?
Hey, good, thanks.
I'm not sure if it's just you or you're like Jack, you have a couple of people, so just let us know, but I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. It's just me, and we're going to be very brief.
Thank you, Ed.
Yeah, I thought you all might appreciate it. It'll leave you more time for public comment.
Time you need. Thank you.
Thank you. We thank the administration for its responsiveness to questions that have been asked as part of the budget process. I know the budget takes a lot of work from a lot of people, and we do appreciate all of that effort. Our committee met only last night, so we will submit our questions in a written document for the administration to address. The process the administration uses to answer these questions will ensure the public will have access to the questions our committee has asked, along with the administration's answers. In our meeting last night, in addition to reviewing the budget categories, we had an active discussion around two broad topics, open choice and bring your own device, where we expect to learn more from an upcoming special meeting of the board. As such, we will likely have further questions on these two topics after that upcoming meeting. We look forward to continuing to engage with the board and the administration as we work towards a budget that we can afford and that delivers the high quality education we expect for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Okay. We will, thank you both. We will get questions from the Board of Finance via email and then share them with the board as soon as we get them. We will move on to further discussion on the 2022-2023 proposed budget and follow-up questions. Dr. Adley.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for those who participated. And we'll work on getting those questions answered for you. So I'd like to share some information that you had in your packet. So with your understanding, we'll simply go through these questions. These were the January 11th generated questions. So you've had a wee opportunity to look at these, so I won't read them particularly, but we can certainly sort of stop along the way as board members may or may not have questions.
So I guess, or do you indicate on here, Dr. Adley, what's been updated from the last time?
These are all the updates.
These are all the updates.
Like January 11th, these are all the updates.
So we'll just, I think in the interest of time and getting through it, we'll go open it up to board questions and we'll start with RC 11.
Where are you, Mr. Chairman? Where are you?
RC1.
RC1 is January 11th.
All right.
I included the January 8th
Got
question
it.
just so you had
That
a
was
full
the-
packet.
that
Sorry.
When I picked up the packet was on the top, so thank you. So we will go to. Thank you for that, Mr. DeMeo. We'll go to RC1, Darien High School. So question one, any additional questions or comments? Mrs. Ackman.
So the question was mine, so thank you. I guess the only thing I'd think for the board to consider is it sounds as if what we're doing is we are now actually bringing in FTEs based on the amount of money and work that we're doing with parents donating to their schools and student activity fund, which is great. I'm an active donator myself, but I do think there's some sort of balance there. If we're bringing in FTEs and healthcare and work, we do have to realize that this is for additional fundraising. I just think it's something for the board to contemplate.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Any further questions on question one on the Bursar? I'm also looking online here. I don't see any hands up. Okay. So we'll go on to two questions about GASB 84. Any additional board questions or follow-up based on the response there? All right, good. We will move on to question 3. Yes.
Sorry, could I
Hey,
just
Julie,
ask
go ahead.
a quick question on that one? And this is kind of bursar related, but it's in the GASB section. It says that the high school bursar currently processes approximately 2,500 transactions. I was just curious, and Rich, you could probably just answer this. What does it entail to be processing those transactions? I would expect they're just through the program, but am I misunderstanding, or is it labor intensive?
It could be anything from posting a catalog item and following up on receipts of revenue from the parents. It could be recording a check that was deposited. It could be issuing a reimbursement or issuing a check to a vendor. It could be a reconciliation between the various sub-accounts within the account. So it can be a variety of things.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Best. So we'll move on to question 3. What do we use the 12,000 for? Handbook printing 4. So there's a breakdown in there. Any additional questions or comments on that? Mrs. Parent?
Can I just make a suggestion for next year? It doesn't have to be for this year. Can we just say printing, not handbook printing, so it's not the confusion?
Thank you. All right. We'll move on to question 4. How many PE health classes hit the 26-28 class size? And is that what the principal is concerned about? Any additional comments or questions there? We'll move on to question 5. What is the balance of the student activity account at DHS? All right, the response is there. Any additional questions or comments on that? Thank you. We'll move on to question 6. What fees are being collected from parents or students that go into the student activity account? So that outlines the parking fees, rental fees, and other stuff that's listed here. Mr. Brown.
Sorry, number 4, previous on the PE ratio.
Sure.
What is the current?
Mike.
What's that?
Your mic.
It's a quick one. It says it'll reduce the class size from 24 to 22.
What was the question?
So I was just trying to figure out. Nope, never mind. I'm good.
You got it, right?
You good? All right, Mr. Brown. Mrs. Best.
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. So we'll go back to 6. Any questions on the fees collected that go into the student activity account? Not seeing any hands. All right. We'll move on to RC3 Middlesex. Can we have a job description for the campus monitor? The job description is attached. Any further questions or comments right now on that? We'll move on to, sure, Mrs. McCammon.
I'm not used to this kind. For any of our new board members or people who just want a reminder that there was some question about the difference between the campus monitor and the SRO, but the SRO presentation was on March 27th, 2018. And it's just helpful if you want to go back and see what the goals of that program were.
Thank you, Mrs. McCammon. We will move on to question 8. How is flex time used? Can we get a breakdown of what flex looks like on a day-to-day basis? How will there be time available for the Genius Hour? So that question pretty much outlines that. Any questions or comments? Mrs. Parent?
So as I listened to the RTM education meeting, there were a lot of questions about who would access this program and what the program was. And I think those questions have been answered, but I just want to reiterate for people that may be confused is the word, or just haven't come across the information. Is it a package curriculum? And first of all, let's back up. This is for every single middle school student. Yes. Okay. And then it ends in a presentation, and it's a beginning, middle, end project, right? And is it a pack? Are we buying a package curriculum that we're just importing into the classroom, or is this something that will be developed? And I know there was talk about inquiry-based learning, which I'm a huge proponent of, but just would love a little more detail so that people can be clear about what this is.
No, it is not a packaged curriculum, and it would change every year based on the interest of the students at that time. And it also ties into a recommendation from our gifted education review about enrichment for all, as well as I'm looking at program for students identified as gifted or as Yes, gifted.
Right, but it's not just for gifted, it's not just the idea program. it is
No, that's
every
for
single
everyone
middle
in the
school.
school, yes.
Thank you.
Mrs. McCammon.
Just building on that, is this something, I mean, I think you talked about some area schools doing it, but it's something just that what's really the driver?
The driver is looking beyond what students would typically encounter in their school day and generating areas of passion and finding peers that have those shared areas of interest. So you can spend time with them and explore deeply through an inquiry-based model and then share your learning at the end.
Thank you.
Mrs. Ackman.
So there just seemed to be a fair amount of communication, excuse me, confusion in the RTM meeting. I'm back, everybody. If you missed me, I'm back. It is indeed that all children will participate in it. This isn't a self-selecting, this is for all kids. It's a different way to utilize flex time. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's using Flex differently one day a month, so 10 different times a year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman.
Oh, see.
Mrs. Worm.
So I thought it was an optional. So this is
No. It's all
additional
students.
work for all children.
I wouldn't call it work. I would say it's an additional experience that they're going to have during their regular flex time. So they're not going to have homework for Genius Hour.
Mrs. Parent.
And how many other opportunities are there for pure inquiry-based learning at the middle school?
That are this authentic and student generated, I would say few. They probably have some that are embedded in our curriculum. But again, those are opportunities that there isn't too much choice in those experiences. So this is spending time once a month for them to explore an area that they care deeply about.
Right.
With a teacher who likely shares a similar interest.
Mrs. Ackman.
So, I mean, a little history, because I do think this was a robust conversation last night. So I just want to add some color so that if education is coming back with questions. Pre-flex, we used to just have students, or the district had students read during the day. Then we carved out flex and we started doing different time, but it wasn't just pure reading. So we've done some social emotional work. I'm still a little confused what happened in Capstone, but trust me, we'll hit that in the curriculum committee, I'm sure. But this is an extension of time where we used to have kids. At one point, the idea was they should just read during the day. Then we thought, you know what, no, we can do something different with that time. So this is an extension or maybe an enrichment of what flex time is, not just more per se. It's what I understand it to be. If I'm wrong, please let me know.
No, I think that's a good summary.
Thank you.
And is there a driver behind the scenes in terms of talking to students about flex time and how they use it, what they're using it for currently? And is it the new principal that's in there looking at, you know, how we use it? As Mrs. Ackman said, this has evolved over time as to what we're doing with that time versus just, hey, take your time to read versus more interactive type projects or ideas.
So I would say number one, giving students an opportunity for inquiry-based learning. Whenever we can do that, we'd love to do it. And especially at the middle school, giving students a chance to have some choice and explore something that they care about. There's not much more to it than that. It's just an attempt to get students more engaged and excited about their learning.
Yes.
Go ahead, Dr. Adler.
And yes, the new principal bringing forth different types of ideas to support student learning.
Thank you. Mrs. Worm.
So I apologize because I'm struggling with this a little bit. And I'm absolutely 100% for inquiry-based learning. This does remind me very much of the ninth grade idea project, which I am always a proponent of. But has anyone, and originally, like I said, I originally thought this was optional for students, right? And I think when we are in a time when a lot of remediation is still needed, to now be giving these students something else, even if it is something they're passionate about, is this necessarily the time? And has anyone asked the students, do they feel like they have time in their day that they can use this? Right, I think a lot of this is going on and we're talking about we we hear constantly about mental health, mental health, mental health. But I really feel like that, or that we need to listen to our students, but I don't think anyone is asking students. So have the students been asked, or they've been brought into the conversation?
No, it was a budget proposal from the administration.
Thank you, Mrs. Warren. Mrs. Perrin.
Would this supplant, what would this supplant from what's happening currently in Flex? You're taking, what is it? Right, so it's like 9 hours, right? So what would it supplant?
So there's 3 different things that happen in Flex. It's either SEL 2 days a week, 2 days a week it's extra help or makeup, and 1 day a week it's reading. So they would rotate what would be missed that once a month. So over the course of the year, they would miss 4 SELs, 4 makeup days, and 2 reading days, if my math is correct. And once a month, they would miss 5 minutes of each of their classes to make up the hour for it to be Genius Hour and not Genius 25 minutes, because you can't get too deep with inquiry in 25 minutes.
So is this, can it come to the point of some of the questions? If a student feels they need time to do homework or do reading, can the student just advocate for themselves that they may not want to participate in Genius Hour based on where they are in their grade and with what they feel they need to work on?
So typically I've not experienced Genius Hour, but I've lived other programs like it. Students who have a passion about reading, it's not unlikely that you would have one of the Genius Hour focuses being focused on a group that likes to read and discuss their reading. So I would say that would be a way to think about that. I've not seen any kid not be excited to work with their peers on the things that they care about most.
Thank you, Mr. Chamberlain. Mrs. Worm.
Is there a grade associated with this?
I don't think that's worked out yet. I've seen it done both ways. And it's actually a wonderful opportunity when there's not a grade associated with it to work with some peers across grade levels, because you don't have that opportunity, as you know, too many times in middle school.
Yeah, I think to that point, when you hear about the pressure thinking about moving to high school and everything else, I think something that can drive their passion but is not tied to a grade or a test or an exam, I think gives it a little more flexibility and openness for them to participate in it. Mrs. Achman.
So interestingly, I would hope this would also address the board's concern that sometimes we see a gap between going to middle school and high school. And I know Principal Rodriguez spoke on maybe there'd be a presentation form of this. I think presentations are fairly regular at the high school. I'm not sure how many opportunities we have that. So my understanding, again, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that this would also maybe help some skills that are expected to be honed at the high school, and giving kids a chance to do that and something they're interested in at the middle school. To Mr. Janeen's point, that's a passion project rather than I got to get an A. So I just think that this board's also been asking for some of those stopgaps, and I see this as one potential one, unless again, I am mistaken.
No, I agree with you. My experience with it is, I know it's a reason why kids want to come to school that day. I've actually seen it where it's every week. That's typically the most exciting week. And the analysis that we had done at one point was it was the day of the week of lowest absences in a school was the day that occurred.
We'll take that.
And also the fewest visits to the nurse's office. That was the other stat that we had.
All right, good. Thank you for the conversation and questions around that. We'll move on to RCs on the elementary schools, RCs 5 through 10. We had a request for job description and schedule for the PE teacher. So that is outlined here. Any additional questions or thoughts on that? Yes, Mrs.
Yeah,
Achman.
sorry, that one's
Sure.
mine again. I guess I understand the contractual obligations for prep and lunch, but what we are saying is that there is a gym period scheduled every single period of the day in every single school, so that the only time to take prep and lunch is when the itinerant is in the building?
Yeah, the only time, I'll reverse that if I can answer it with the reverse. The only time the itinerant can teach a class is when that home teacher is not teaching a class because the space isn't available.
Okay, so sorry, I keep going, I'm gonna go back because I have my history here. There were times where we had our school so crowded that we were teaching 2 gym classes at one period. So now we're back to, we have one full-time class. As far as I know, we're not running dual gym classes.
That is part of there have been no dual classes during my tenure, and this would continue. There being no dual classes.
Okay, I gotta think on it, but thank you, Karen,
Okay,
for
Mrs.
the
Ackman.
information.
Sure. Mrs. McCammon.
I just can't read the chart. I don't get it.
So there are, so if you look
Sorry,
at,
what was the question?
I don't understand the chart.
so this example is, there are, in this model, there are 3 first grade classes. So that would be 1A, or so they're teaching 1 first grade class, 1 second, 1 third, and they teach them twice during a cycle. So if I'm the itinerant teacher, on an A day, I have my first grade class and I see those students again on wherever the 1B is. So then 2A, 2B, 3A, 3B. Because the other piece that makes itinerant schedules when you do twice a cycle so complicated is you would like them to see the same students both times they teach them, so you don't have 2 different PE teachers. So this is just showing over to make up that FTE, they have 1, in this example, this doesn't mean it will be these grade levels. They'll have a 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th class. They'll have 1 of each grade level as part of their schedule, just to model it out.
Thank you.
See why I
There
have
may
to
be more
think on
questions.
it. That's why I need more time.
There may be more questions on that, but thank you, Mr. Tranberg. We'll move on to RC 12 maintenance. Job description on the groundskeeper. Any additional questions or comments on the groundskeeper? Rich, I know you talked a little bit about acreage that we have and current staffing versus acreage. And then I think some folks have brought up the question of, we have a lot of fields that we spent a lot of money or had a lot of money donated. Thank you to the community for turf versus grass. So anything to add in terms of our current staffing versus the amount of space that we have?
So some districts do it differently. Some have their own employees who maintain the grounds, and some have parks and recs who maintain the grounds up to the sidewalks. Whether you look at the staffing from the districts that have their own staff members or the districts that have parks and recs, we're probably about 2 groundskeepers short compared to where everybody else is. Even with a lot of turf, there's still turf maintenance that has to go on. There's still garbage that has to be picked up. There's still a lot of gardening that has to be done and mulching that has to be done. And then the groundskeepers also do a lot of moving of items. So if there's a request to have something moved from the middle school, let's say to the high school or vice versa, it's the groundskeepers that are doing that. But like acreage wise and capacity wise, we're probably too short. The request for the 1 is really to help alleviate some of that burden. I know there was a question about whether the staff could work overtime as opposed to adding the FTE. It's not really reasonable to expect that the staff that we have is going to work 10 hours a day every day for the school year. That'll lead to burnout. And, if they have families and kids that they'd like to see, and then we're not going to be able to have them do that every day for the year.
Okay. And then I think the question that constantly comes up is working with Parks and Rec in town, but there you get into shared services and that gets into contractual obligations. And while it's something that down the road, maybe we should think about or look at in terms of shared services, it's not that easy a decision to make to have it part of this budget season. Would you agree with that?
Correct. Same with even contracting out. There's limitations on really what we could do there. And we're probably pushing that limit as it is.
In terms of contracting out services based on our existing contract and staff?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. McCammon.
So Rich, I know you covered this a little bit already, but what is happening today? Are things just going not cleaned up as much as they should be? What's the impact now?
So things are either not cleaned up, the grass isn't cut probably as often as people would like. The time frame in which things are being moved is slower than we would like. Mike does have the guys doing a typical cycle, but even when Dr. Adley started, the first thing he asked was how often does the grass get cut at central office? And I think Mike said it's once every 2 weeks almost. So when you see the grass is long or you see there's weeds, it's because they're off doing something else.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McCammon. Thank you, Mr. Rudel.
Right,
Sure, Mr. Sini, go ahead.
Sorry. When the district renegotiated the Y contract, one of the changes was the district basically charged the Y for additional maintenance of the facilities it rented. When I think about the fields, is the rental fee inclusive of a maintenance fee, if you will, a custodial fee?
So it's not a custodial fee, but there is a cost associated with maintaining the outside of the campus. So the field usage, they're not renting our buildings, which is why there's no custodial fee. But it is intended to partially offset what you see in care grounds.
Okay, so we can assume that the revenues that were being generated would cover the incremental maintenance of, garbage pickup and any other maintenance associated with the field use.
Yes, I mean, the need for the groundskeeper is more operational in terms of just everyday, day-to-day use, not necessarily the use of the fields by outside groups.
All right, thanks, Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Sini. Yes.
Rich, is this need a year-round need, not just a during the school year need?
It is a year-round need.
It starts with orientation. It starts with kids coming at the start of the school year, buildings being ready aesthetically, and
they're also the first people to do snow removal.
Yeah,
The grounds guys are, at the forefront of doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rudel. We'll move on to RC 13 music. Should we consider buying music attire? This is outlined here. Any further discussion the board wants to have on this right now? Mrs. Worm.
I just have a question about it. Is there a policy about uniforms as to which groups get, from what I see, it looks like the sports that have uniforms included are uniforms that can be passed down, right? So for instance, gymnastics and diving, swimming, those kids or families purchase those uniforms themselves every year because it would be gross to pass down a bathing suit or a leotard, right? So I feel like this kind of falls into that same thing. It's your own clothing or something that you're wearing. It's not being passed down. Is there a policy around this, or we just kind of willy-nilly, this one we pay for, this one we don't?
no, this has been the practice for some time regarding music, and it's not dissimilar than other districts that would do the same thing, but the board certainly has discussed this a couple of years in terms of.
No, it makes
being
sense to
equitable.
me. I'm just wondering if, because I know this conversation has come up year after year. So I'm wondering if there's something, a policy about what's included, what's not. That's all.
Mrs. Best.
Thank you. I can certainly appreciate not passing on leotards and bathing suits. The reason that I asked this question again is because these are curricular classes. These aren't extracurriculars. And so we do say that as a Board of Education, we pay for things that are required for kids to participate in their curriculum. And these uniforms have to be worn for performances that they must participate in order to get grades in their classes. That said, my question this evening is, I think this is, correct me if I'm wrong, all enrolled students in the music programs. So I'm guessing that this number would actually be a whole lot lower because most students would get a few years at least out of one uniform. I've got a kid in her third year of her band dress, for example. So I don't know if we could try to put some kind of filter on what we might actually be purchasing, like for the freshmen or, 50% or something along those lines.
Thank you, Mrs. Best. Yes, Mrs. Ackman.
I think our practice has been things that come back to the school and are kept by the school purchases. And I'm not saying that we can't change that practice. Music comes up because it is curricular versus extracurricular, but to Mrs. Worms, there's not a board policy regarding uniforms. There's been an administrative regulation on that, and there has been a practice, and that the uniform comes back to the school so that it can be passed down. And to your point, I don't know that anyone's looking to pass down bathing suits or leotards, but I guess someday there could be a discussion on that. I think music comes up because there is curricular tied to actual grades, and it is required. So Where we go on that, I don't know, but that's been the practice and the admin reg versus a board policy.
That makes sense. I appreciate the clarification that it's part of curriculum.
Thank you. You think 12 is self? Yep. Justini?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I don't have any children in the music program at the moment, but when I look at the description, black suit, black dress, black top and pants. I mean, are some of these everyday, items? And I think of a uniform in sports, you're not going to typically wear the whole uniform to, church or something like that. So I'm just trying to get a better idea along the lines of the uniform that's required. Thanks.
Anything you want to add to that, Dr. Allen?
No, Chris, you have a go with that one.
I'll get more information from the music department.
I think you're more chance of crossing over different settings from one to the other, but not exclusively.
So,
But I do think too that I don't know. The only thing that pops out to me, I mean, having a daughter in chorus or whatever, it's just wears a black dress, which she has plenty of. I guess, and I see most of these students, they wear black pants, they wear a white shirt, they wear a black tie, or they wear a suit. So some of it is stuff they seem to have themselves. I know there is a rental option, but band is kind of a specific uniform. So those folks that are in band, they purchase those uniforms that they wear, and those are not passed down.
I need to get detailed
Okay,
information.
that's fine.
from the music
Yeah,
department.
I'm just not sure what one does with the band uniform after they graduate, other than pass it down. Mrs.
I don't
Ogden,
think there's any sorry.
what's that?
I don't think there's any organized way to pass it down. No.
Right, okay.
yeah, and then maybe, because, yes, general music for chorus, you wear your black shirt and your white shirt, but then when you get in the upper levels, you're asking kids to have a tuxedo, and it's not just pull it out of your closet. You're asking
Right.
girls to have a very specific black dress. So I don't have kids in the program. I can't answer what it is, but this is why it keeps coming up, because parents say you buy the whole soccer uniform or you buy the whole football uniform. Why does my sophomore only has a tuxedo? Because of the requirement of participating in this group. So
Mr. Tranberg, I would suggest just get some more information beyond the questions here, and then I think we could banner this around all night long, but to continue to talk about uniforms with everything else we have on the agenda, then I think the board has to think about the direction they want to go in here in terms of what we do provide and what we don't provide, and come to that conclusion. All right, Mrs. Best, anything to add?
I was just going to add, it is a specific dress. It's a specific tuxedo. It's a specific black pants and tops for high school band, chorus, and orchestra. It's not
Right.
just an outfit.
Which involves rentals, so good.
Thank you.
Right.
That was it.
Thank you. RC 15 technology, job description around the technician. There's a lot of information here. I'll open it up to board questions or comments. We may come back. Go ahead, Mrs. McCammon. Thank you.
Would you please spend a little time talking about MMS? I understand that's why we're hiring the technician, but that's a big difference, 1 or 4 hours and 12. What's going on there?
So that's the basic turnaround time that teachers have to wait to get some work done, to get work orders filled.
Mhm.
So we're probably hundreds of hours behind right now in the work orders.
Why is the middle school different than the high school and the elementary schools?
It's just the size. The middle school tends to have, well, I'll say from a student point of view, there's another student component to that. So the middle schools tend to have more issues just developmentally with their machines.
Mhm. Okay.
And is that also based on the current staffing that it's taking 12 hours?
Well, it's just, yeah, directly, yes, the use of the ratio of people to actual computer types, I guess.
It's lower at the middle school and higher at the high school and the elementary school?
I'd have to check the number there, but
There's 2 techs at the high
Yeah.
school currently and only 1 tech at the middle school currently.
Okay.
And there's no rollover that if the response time at the high school is an hour, and if tech's not doing anything at the high school and you got 12-hour wait time at middle school, does that tech roll over to help the middle school?
So Jeff, I think Jeff is online, but Jeff does flex the people when he can, so sometimes he gotta push people up the elementary school, especially during COVID. You know, for student devices, our largest repair trip at middle school.
Okay.
We see far more repair tickets for student devices at the middle school.
So do we need to shift one of the two from the high school to Middlesex?
I don't think the high school could operate with one tech, given the size of the staff and students.
Okay. Mrs. McCammon.
So looking at this, I know it's a ballpark, but if 55% of the day is basically repairs and we move to BYOD at the high school, would we free up a lot of technician time there?
This is no, not really. This is strictly, they're still going to need to be doing what they're doing at the high school. This is strictly for the middle school.
No, I understand, but I'm just pushing harder.
Okay, that's okay.
Because that is one of the things that we're certainly hearing about, that if a certain percentage of the repair would be handled now in the home, would that lessen the load on the high school? I could answer that question different ways, but I'd be making things up. So I'd love to.
Well, I'm going to
hear
tell you,
from
I'm not
guys.
going to anticipate that. Jeff, Mr. Adams, are you there?
I'm here.
You want to respond to that just from your department, but
Sure, absolutely. So no, the troubleshooting time will not change at the high school because those technicians are basically doing level 1 troubleshooting, which is anything from connectivity to basic application support. They're not actually doing in-depth level 2 or level 3 hardware repair. So in fact, I think level 1 troubleshooting will actually go up a little bit with the diversity of devices we'll see in a BYOD model.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Mr. Brown.
Hey, Jeff, following up on that, are we doing any support for a student who brings their own currently at the high school, level 1?
We are not, no.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any other questions on 13? We'll move on to 14.
Sorry, Duke, I'm a little late on my
Sure, go ahead,
questions.
Mr. Cini.
It takes a while to hit the button. Can any of this support be done remotely, i.e., you could share across different schools with a call or a Zoom or something like that?
A lot of it is hands-on. You need to be in front of a device, so it's very difficult to do it remotely. And in fact, we saw it during the pandemic because my staff was pretty much in during the entire pandemic.
Do you have the ability to, when I have a problem at work, they just basically take over my laptop? Do you have the ability to do that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cini. Thank you, Jeff. Mrs. Ackman.
Would we have that ability in?
BYOD.
Would we
Mike,
have that
please.
ability in the bring your own?
Jeff, do you have that Zoom in available? Do you have that take over the individual computer in the BYOB model?
Yes, we will.
Okay. Not sure I said that right. BYOB. Maybe that's what I'm thinking about at 8:30 at night. Mr. Brown.
Just a quick, on the pairs you see at Middlesex, can you give a percentage or generalize, like is it the same thing over and over, or can you attribute it to a similar cause?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear the question.
Yeah, I'm not sure I said it well. Is it normally the space bar falls off all the Chromebooks, so it's just the Chromebook model we have, or the kids drop them, or they spill orange juice, or it's just, who knows?
It's everything. It's everything. You hit it. Cracked screens, missing keys, operating system rebuilds, application loading. It runs the gamut.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. We'll move on to 14 caseloads for technicians. Any additional questions or comments on that? We'll move on to 15. If we move to BYOD at the high school in level 1, would there be excess capacity at the high school? I think we've kind of touched base a little bit on that. All right. Any additional questions there? We are good. 16, if everything is web-based, why do we need to purchase the 25 Mac labs? Any additional questions there? All right, good. 17, the 85 middle school desktops. So these are all really an age issue. So any additional questions there on those? And Jeff, very quickly, is there any comment you can make with respect to the RTM questions about, do all 85 need to be the same? Can we order the 10 for the administration with a different type of setup versus the 24 for special ed in terms of what they need, or the time and energy spent on that would just take away from any savings that there would be?
Yeah, these are some very basic computers. There's no high processing power. These are pretty similar across the board. And yeah, it would be a lot of work to determine who needs what kind of processing power and storage.
So these are the basics, and the basic covers everything that is needed for administration, guidance, nursing, special ed, cafeteria, auditorium, library, art, music, and PE. The basic computer that you're ordering covers all their needs.
Correct.
Okay. Any additional questions? Mr. Maroney?
Yes, it's not for this budget cycle, but I think for this, it should replicate Mr. Lynch's replacement schedule for trucks and things, and have a replacement schedule so we don't have an 85 purchase 1 year and then 0 for the next 7, 8, 9 years, whatever it is. But it should be kind of spaced out more evenly through the budget, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Maroney. Mr. Brown?
Just a question on the phone system that we're running. Is there any ability to go to like a soft phone or unified communications on these devices, or do we need to actually have telephones? Because I know teachers never call me about my kids, so I don't know what they need them for.
So your question is?
I'm just asking, like, phone system support, is there a way, and I guess this is to Jeff, is there any way we could go forward or look at not having phones to have to support moving forward, or by using some of the computers and other devices that we hand out to the teachers, or is that not being looked at, or would it make sense, not make sense to look at that?
Well, the phones are a sunk cost already, so they've already been paid for in prior years. The only cost going forward is the support of the phone system, which does include hard phones, soft phones, lines, etc. So whatever type of device you have at the end user, we'll still incur that support cost.
I think if I think back in time over some incidents locally and throughout the country, that the old-fashioned phone line has come in handy in terms of trying to make emergency calls or get through to fire, police, or emergency over cell phones being blocked or cell towers not working. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yes, and I think it is a legal requirement that we have a hard phone in every classroom.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Could I just say, Mr. Maroney, page 136, if there's something different that you're looking for, that this is the actual technology replacement cycle. But if there's something is askew on that, we're certainly willing to, look at that.
Did you mean, Dennis, that you like the schedule, but you want to ask that from a purchasing perspective, we consider uncoupling purchases like with the server, for example? So where you might see servers being replaced over a 3-year cycle instead of all servers in 1 year. I think that was your question.
Yes.
Just sort of space it out.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Well,
Eight,
I'm
yes,
sorry.
Mrs. Hoffman.
It's my understanding though that the servers are all almost up with their useful life.
Yes.
So it
Not
may
this
have been
year,
the original purchase was
Right.
done. So this is the replacement cycle because they're just aging out. So
Right.
I don't, it might be difficult to uncouple. I mean, I'd love to hear if we could, but it might be difficult to uncouple at this point.
Jeff, is it kind of the way to do servers is you replace them all at once and there is no really schedule of a server every couple of years?
Well, what has changed over the years is that servers are virtual. So in this replacement, it's actually just one unit. And within that one unit is all the redundancy and all of the servers within the district. And it's that one unit that has gone end of life. So where we're saying replace the servers, it's actually one physical unit but we have over 45 servers in the district that this will upgrade.
Okay, thank you. I think that explanation helps for some of the questions that were brought to the table too. Thank you, Jeff. 18, are the grade 12 iPads usable? So that question's answered. Any additional thoughts or questions there? Yeah, good. Thought Mr. Maroney was going to raise his hand. RC 17 health. Any questions on 19, charging the nurses to this RC because they really do service all students? 20, should we move the LPN to RC 24? I think we were all in agreement that that makes sense based on that is a one-to-one for special education.
Just
Yes,
on
Mrs.
that,
Ackman.
so I agree. It's the second part of that statement that concerns me. I'm not saying we move everyone or we don't move everyone. What I'm asking for is time be allotted to the appropriate RC. So if, let's just take an extreme example. If no psychologists were seeing any student as part of their IEP, then they should be nowhere near special ed. If students are seeing a psychologist as part of 5% of the psychologist times for IEPs, then 5% should be, in my opinion, in special ed. Like if we're tracking costs, we just need to track consistently. If we're not, then we don't have to. But it's not an all or nothing proposition. And I think that's what concerned me. It was kind of like, we're moving all nurses. Well, move the nurses that service all students because you're a general ed student first to health. Move a student who is specific based on a need to where their need is, wherever that might be in the budget. So I agree with moving the nurses that services all students. I would put the LPN back in special ed where it's always been for the one-on-one services. And then in terms of if the BO agrees, we'll move all psychologists in all schools, RCs and social workers. I don't know that the BOE can determine that. It depends where you're spending the money. I think
you could simply just allocate it where the state's going to allocate it regardless of where we have it. It's like, I think it's 85-15. So the state will allocate that for us because that's what they do. So we could decide to put 15 in one and 85 in the other because that's the way it's going to be reported anyway.
I know, but I think what we're trying to do as a town is understand where our cost is as a cost accounting measure. That's all I'm trying to do. I don't really care if it's 85-15 one year and it's 100 another year. I'm just trying to track my costs as an accounting measure. So in terms of moving all anywhere, I would just move them where they are appropriately, the monies are being expended and leave it at that.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Mr. Sini.
Rich, can you track as granularly as 95.5 or in terms of where you're providing the services, or is it difficult to track the expenses at such a granular level?
I think it would change every year. And it could even change throughout the year. It could be that you start the year off, let's say at 85-15, and then you end the year at 75-25. So it's
But
really.
can you track it? I guess, can you physically track it to that level is my question.
No, those staff members would actually have to fill out some type of like timesheet or information saying we saw X amount of special ed kids and we saw X amount of general education students.
Which
is that practice?
Good, Mr. Sini.
Is that practice done today, or you'd have to create that practice of a timesheet?
We do track how many special education students they see. Shirley can correct me if I'm wrong, and we do that for excess cost purposes, but I don't know if we do any of that for gen ed students.
Is that where the methodology comes from the state in terms of 85-15?
It's typically because they assume a 15% identification rate.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Klein, did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Mr. Dean. I just wanted to confirm that that we do track it for excess cost. And to Mr. Cini's question, if you look at our answer on RC 24 for 23 for the school psychologist, we're able to, we'd have to have a system to do it to show how much time is spent at PPTs, how much time is spent at 504s, how much time we have to be very granular about it. It would change throughout the year. It wouldn't be a constant number, but we could establish a system for that.
Thank you, Mrs. Klein. Mrs. Zockman.
To be clear, we track all of our
Correct.
IEP services
Correct.
as they are delivered to students. So right now, what we've done is say 1-in-1, but we are in full compliance with the law and track our services. So it's not creating a new system. We do it. I don't really care for 1-on-1. There were people who were saying it's not fair to divide it that broadly. I don't care if we do it 85-15. At the very least, we know we do it.
Correct. Yes.
And just moving them all one or the other is like flipping a coin each year.
Thank you, Mrs. Zockman. Mrs. Warren.
I guess my question is really, what is the end goal? Right? What are we trying to see? How do we want it broken down? Is it just to see how much we spend on special education? Because if that's the case, aren't we trying to not single out special education? Aren't we trying to look at everyone as a whole? I guess that's my issue with it. Like, what are we trying to accomplish? If we need to know what it looks like so that we can plan for next year, that's one thing. If we're just looking at it to point to say, this is how much we spend on special education, I'm not sure.
I think, and I don't want to speak for all the board members, but I think you're looking for fiscal responsibility in terms of being able to track expenditures 1 year from the next to be consistent, whether it has changed or whether it hasn't.
Okay.
Good question. RC 26 ELP. Can we see tuition from other area preschools? And then, yes.
I just want to clarify that these pricings for tuition that you're seeing here are this current year's tuition, and they will likely increase for next year. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And you see 22 where our proposed tuition is. Any additional questions there? We'll move on to RC 24, special education. Could you please provide a narrative similar to what we provided for SLP? Any additional questions on question 23? Question 24, who do the school psychologists report to? Should they be charged to the buildings? Again, the school psychologists report to the principals. If the BOE agrees, we will move the psychologists and social workers to the school RCs. So I'm not sure. Does the board want to have a conversation around this? Is there a recommendation from finance, Rich, on this? In terms of, what we look for, what we want to see on a regular basis? And then is there anything we want to change as a board?
I mean, really, either way is fine. If you look at the districts that do have it, like the equivalent of an RC 24, they also usually have something called like a PPS budget. So they separate out special education and PPS. And so PPS is typically things like social workers, psychologists, guidance counselors. They're usually coded into a PPS RC or cost center. And then special education, if they have a special education cost center, it's usually special education teachers, speech therapists, things like that. And then there's some districts that don't actually have a special education cost center, and everything is pushed into the schools.
Okay. And we do have practice now. So we bring out library, music, art. So that all of those could be a direct line, could also be in, technically could also be in these other RCs if
Right.
people we just do it differently. Different board, do different practices.
So my thought process would be, I understand the conversation around the nurse and the nursing, but I think this is a broader question for the board that maybe work should be done at the finance committee level to see if we want to make any significant changes about the way we're reporting. I'm not sure this is a real conversation around the existing budget versus a change to how we want to report or look at things going forward. So other than the few changes that we've agreed to, I mean, we could go through the whole budget process and continue to ask ourselves the same questions as to where we want these things placed. So does that make sense? Mr. Cini?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Duke. Basically what we're talking about now is making accounting adjustments going forward. And I think we should kind of take that away from the budgeting aspect.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Sini.
I think the line of supervision is one thing versus where the expenditure happens. So,
Right. Yep.
you know, so
No, that's a good point. All right, thank you. 25, sorry, could we have more detail on the professional development in this RC? And we are still on the special ed RC. So that's a good outline there. Any questions on the professional development?
Well, just thank you. That it's really, really helpful to see it broken out, to see. Thank you.
RC 19 curriculum, again, looking for more detail on the professional development. Any additional questions on that? Mr. Brown?
What is equitable instructional practices?
So those are just content specific. So if the social studies department wanted to bring someone in, they would, those funds would support the cost of that over the professional development days.
And I guess the follow-up would be bring in for what in this example?
So when you're thinking about content specific, and we're talking about just responsive curriculum in general, looking and making sure that we have accurate representation, portrayal within the document, strategies for teachers, suggestions for curriculum, those types of things.
And does this overlap with the DEI initiative, or will it work into that?
I would say potential recommendations from a DEI committee would be considerations for the department chairs and administrators to look at for the professional development for departments. Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
Brown.
Chris.
Mrs. McCammon.
Where it notes Wilson, that is Wilson training for general ed teachers. Is that what that is?
Yes, which most of, even general education often comes under RC 24. It's a collaboration between the departments. And typically RC 19 would supplement in case there's a few extras. That's how we've budgeted in the past.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. 27, what is the title of the book we are purchasing for Western Civ? Any additional comment there? We'd like to make sure we all get a copy at the board table. We're very interested in reading more about Western Civ. 28, line 12001. Understanding the DEI consultant for next year, and what are those costs that you're building in for this budget that we're talking about now? So any additional questions around that explanation? Okay, thank you. Question 29, could we have more information on the TC K through 12 units for next year? What does this include? Where do the new requirements come from? So pretty detailed explanation there. Rich, anything you want to add to that?
no.
Okay. Any board questions? Mrs. Best? No. All right, looked like you wanted to ask a question. Very good. Thank you. Last question. Can we reconcile the FTE in the personal objective pages 184 to 198 throughout the budget book? Attached is a reconciliation. Any additional, I know this, people were trying to, Mrs. Ackman, you were trying to do your comparison. Does it get what you needed, or?
Yep.
Okay, good. Any other questions on that? All right, good. So that is the follow-up on Board of Ed questions. Anything else you wanted to add, Dr. Adley?
No, if there are other questions from the board, either now or in the next day or two, if you want to forward those, we'll add them to the discussion for Tuesday.
And I would ask also that, again, any additional questions, I think we have a lot captured, but any additional questions or information you'd like for the meeting on the 24th with respect to open choice and also the one-to-one initiative, please email those questions into myself and Dr. Adley. Mrs. Ackman.
On that, Mr. Deneen, can the administration be prepared to provide at Monday's meeting, a document on open choice, because I'm being sent multiple documents that people are creating in the public. Arguably, I would say that they're not all factual. They may be people's best attempts to be factual, but I have no place to point people right now, other than saying, go back to watch these meetings on YouTube or Zoom. Can we have a presentation kind of with the facts and just the facts, so that if people in the public want to know, they know that's a resource to look at.
Sure.
And then if they have questions, they can ask questions based on that. But right now, I've seen at least 3 different documents put together, often anonymously, sometimes not. And so I think it's confusing to people of the public on where to look. I would like us to have a place to look.
And I would just add to that, that if there's, I mean, I read a bunch of stuff on various websites, all state websites, but if there is a good place to point people to also over and above that, I would rather direct them to a specific area, along with what I think we do need is a full-blown presentation from A to Z on the program. And I believe you're organizing that, and CES is also going to join the meeting, correct?
Correct.
Great.
Again, if the board members have any questions, either about open choice or anything else for that matter, budget, the sooner you get it to us, the better, as we prepare for, like, we've got going back to back here with meetings on Monday night and Tuesday night. So it'd just be helpful to get it out. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sini.
And along the open choice, we've amassed a number of questions. Can we get a list of kind of the questions to date that you guys are preparing for, so we know whether or not things are being covered, or you have it covered prior to the meeting now?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Sini. Any other addition? Mrs. Worm?
Just a question. So CES, I did see the one meeting when they were here at like 11 o'clock at night, but there wasn't a full presentation. It was just really answering questions. Was there a presentation they did previously that I'm not finding?
No, they didn't do a presentation.
Okay.
There was a presentation, and I have the date. I believe it was November 25th, 2020. But I will get back to you on that. And I believe Dr. Adley did an initial
I did,
presentation.
yes, but not
on
CES.
that.
Maybe
Okay, so-
recirculate.
We've done this like 3 times, so I can give you the dates,
'Cause
times.
I know that CES did a full presentation for New Canaan, that they seem to have gotten something that we didn't. And I'm just curious as to where that is.
No, we probably knew a lot more before we were able to share most of the information, and
Okay.
and the CES are coming to provide any other context or clarify some questions that I didn't answer.
I think they were also here late, but that's just because the meeting went late and there weren't a ton of questions. So I think they were prepared. My understanding is with lots of information. There just were not a lot of questions that evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Worm. Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Any further questions? All right, and we will look forward to questions from our friends over at the Board of Finance and circulate those as soon as we get them. So I will make a motion to adjourn. Mrs. McCammon, second. Mr. Brown. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. See you next week.